This morning on BRN, what to do if you are considering taking a student loan. And we're going to welcome back to the program Betsy Mayotte. She's the president of the Institute of Student Loan Advisors. Betsy, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us again this morning. Betsy, I have to imagine that given all this news, you have heard a lot from your customers. You run a very popular not-for-profit, your audience, so to speak.
Yeah. So, as the mission of our nonprofit is to provide free student loan advice for all consumers. And to say that borrowers are anxious right now is an understatement. Between the reduction in force that we talked about in the last episode, there's been some executive orders that have given people some anxiety. The bill, the reconciliation bill that could affect what types of loans or loan forgiveness programs or loan repayment programs are available to people. Again, the words of the day are anxiety, panic. People are literally saying that they're in tears. There is a lot of anxiety right now.
Yeah, I think that is probably not just with education, but probably across the board in a lot of areas, and certainly understandable. Betsy, is there, we were talking yesterday about the RIF, but let's talk about student loans. I mean, are student loans still a viable option for consumers? I mean, if I'm thinking about going to school, not trades, but going to college or university, is it still viable for me to consider a student loan, or at least a public student loan?
Yes, I mean, federal student loans are not going away for future students. However, I am keeping a close eye on the reconciliation process because there are proposals out there that would reduce the amount that parents could borrow at the federal level on behalf of their undergraduate students, or get rid of that option altogether. There's also a proposal to do the same, either reduce or get rid of altogether what's called the Graduate Plus loan. And so I wouldn't worry about undergrad. Well, I would worry about undergraduates attending higher price school where Parent Plus loans are necessary. But I'd also worry about people trying to get graduate degrees. Now, if those proposals were to go through, there could be a couple of effects. I mean, the nice effect might be colleges might reduce their tuition if that sort of endless federal student loan money isn't there anymore. But what I'm concerned about, what might really happen is, first of all, it would reduce college choice, especially for low income and middle class families. It also might mean that the only other option for them, once they've maxed out the Stafford loans that go to the students, are private loans. And private loans really scare me. Private loans they're essentially credit cards, but harder to discharge in bankruptcy. There's very rarely any lower payment options. The interest rates can be very high, and there's often no deferment or forbearance options. So I will have extreme concerns if the private loan market is the only place these low and middle class families can go to sort of pick up the gap in the cost of tuition.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly would be, it's certainly not, I mean, if you paid, well, I mean, if you have been saving and planning for this for a long period of time and anticipating having a federal student loan and then have it taken off the plate, that is disadvantageous to those people that were planning to use it. What does all this mean for, just to kind of flip, I have limited time and then there's a lot of questions I have for you, Betsy, so my apologies. What about student loan forgiveness? That's officially done, right? I mean, that
no.
Okay, well, what is it? Tell me about student loan forgiveness then.
So
Glad I asked.
There's a whole bunch of different forgiveness programs, but the ones people are talking about the most today is the forgiveness that's baked in to the income-driven plans if you make either 20 or 25 years worth of payments under those plans. Now, some of that forgiveness is at risk due to some litigation around a lower payment option called SAVE that the Biden administration tried to put through. Right. Okay. And because of that court case, new applications into that program are currently temporarily, underlined, bolded, temporarily paused. But the forgiveness component of the program, called income-based repayment, is written into statute. That's not going anywhere for existing borrowers. The other program people talk about a lot is public service loan forgiveness. That's also not going anywhere for existing borrowers. Now, the Trump administration did sign an executive order a couple weeks ago that would, if it were to go through, and that's a big if, anybody who worked for a 501c3 that worked with so-called illegals wouldn't be able to get that time counted to PSLF. Now, listen, I'm not an attorney, but I do know my student loan law, and at least under the law for public service loan forgiveness, they can't do that. And executive orders can't violate federal law. So I'm not particularly worried about that executive order either.
So Betsy, what if I'm a family now? There's a lot of uncertainty. You already told us that. A lot of concern, a lot of anxiety. How do you plan? Well, let's talk about planning a little bit. If you have a 18-year-old maybe coming out of graduating high school this year, hey, it's March, almost April, end of the year's coming. I mean, what do you need to be thinking about when it comes to financing your child's education, or your own education, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, for people that don't already have student loans, I would be paying very close attention to that reconciliation bill and see what changes it makes to student loan programs, both the loans that are available and then the repayment options that might be available for loans made on or after the date of enactment of this purported reconciliation bill. No one should ever borrow assuming forgiveness. And, unfortunately, and you and I have talked about this before, and to me, this is a little sad. Higher education is about return on investment these days. And so you should be looking for a way to get higher education to ensure that return on investment is there.
So does that mean like your major? So I don't know, like what major you select, that's going to be, that will dictate most likely what job you might be able to get right out of school.
Right. And if
the first job.
If it's a major that the cost to attain that major is high, but the pay is low, you might want to look into things like going part-time and working to pay out of pocket as much as possible. Starting your degree program at a lower cost school, like a community college or a state school, for the first 2 years, and then transferring into that college that has your degree program of choice. There are ways to not end up with six figures in student loan debt and still attend your school of choice and your degree of choice. But I am concerned about future repayment options and forgiveness options for new loans. Again, not existing loans, but new loans.
And what about, you talked about the CR? I guess that's a congressional review, right? That's the bill. Continuing resolution. I'm sorry, but there will be, I'm assuming, additional legislation, because any executive order has to be followed by some kind of law to codify the executive order. You can't just pass orders and change law without.
Right, an executive order. You're right. Executive orders can't violate federal law.
So they would need to change laws. And so you're keeping an eye out on future laws. You talked about, I think, Representative Virginia Fox's law, but there are probably other bills. And I would imagine the congresspersons are stepping up and saying, okay, well, I've got X number of constituents in my district, and we need to, and X number of those are have student loans or thinking about going to college. They want to go to college.
Yeah, I mean, people have constituents on both sides of the aisle have student loan debt. One other thing that I'm watching, I'm glad you brought up the members of Congress, because something that I think affects everybody is there is a temporary law in place that ends at the end of this year. That would mean that if you got loan forgiveness because you were disabled, or you got loan forgiveness because, God forbid, you should pass away, or the student that you took loans out for passed away, or you got loan forgiveness because you were making payments for 25 years based on your income. If that forgiveness happens before the end of this year, there's no tax on it. But unless Congress extends or makes that permanent, that amount will be taxed. So I'm encouraging everybody to write their member of Congress and encouraging them and to extend that tax moratorium and explain the impact is if they don't extend that tax moratorium.
So is that, Betsy, just to clarify, is that part of the TCJA, the so-called Trump tax cuts from 2017, or is that a separate provision.
It was not part of the Trump tax cuts, but it was part of a different package. I can't remember what that one was called.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess what I was driving to is that, they're trying to come up with an extension. It probably would make sense if you're going to extend those tax cuts to make sure that you also loop in
I
this.
agree. They should do that too. And
I mean, not that I'm in Congress, but I mean, it would just seem to make a lot of sense. If you're going to vote on one thing, you might as well vote on the other. But what logic seems to not always be available in Washington, D.C.
Well, the thing is, this particular tax moratorium, who it affects is really like legit struggling borrowers. These are people who can't work anymore because they're disabled, or people whose income has been so low for the past 25 years that they couldn't afford to pay all their student loans back. So, to me, it does. Therefore, they're not going to be able to afford this tax bill. So I just think it does make sense to extend them.
Well, I guess we will have to continue our conversation with you over the next several months to see if that continues. And I'm sure, Betsy, there will be a lot of more news to discuss. Betsy, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
My pleasure.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website. And your subscription helps support all this great BRN content. And we're backing in tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.